Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Donald Campbell. Now, Donald Campbell is a very interesting character for several reasons. First of all, when he came to the future United States, he was just a boy. His father had actually come from Scotland and gotten 83 families from Scotland who he helped provide the means to travel to North America, specifically New York, under the agreement with a royal governor of New York, that 100,000 acres of land would be provided for these people upon their arrival. Unfortunately, when they showed up, well, the governor of New York just kind of decided, nah, I don't want to do that anymore, and really left these people stranded. Now, they did come to America, and many of them succeed, especially the Campbell family. And Donald Campbell grew up in this scenario, and he got a bit of a distaste for the British. Now, he did end up fighting in the French and Indian War with the British Army, but still, he was a little razzled about the whole thing. So, when the American Revolution began, Donald Campbell gleefully joined the Patriot cause, and he was very soon appointed as a captain in the Continental Army and was commissioned as Deputy Quartermaster General for the Continental Army, and specifically he was the Quartermaster General for the Northern Department. This is a very gigantic position. We've spoken a lot recently about Quartermaster Generals and how they're supposed to feed and clothe and provide for an army. And he worked under Philip Schuyler who was in charge of the Northern Department, helping him prepare his army, and this includes for the invasion of Canada. Now, Donald Campbell joins the invasion of Canada, and as you may know, it goes pretty well until they get to Quebec, specifically Quebec City. Benedict Arnold comes through the woods of Maine with his army, meets up with Major General Richard Montgomery, and things go wrong immediately because they start storming the city of Quebec. Richard Montgomery is shot in the head and killed immediately. Benedict Arnold is shot shortly thereafter and dragged from the field, and suddenly Donald Campbell finds himself in charge of what's usually called the Battle of Quebec or the Invasion of Quebec. He finds himself in charge, and he was a quartermaster general. Now, he had military experience, but he was not prepared to be the one overseeing this entire operation. So what he does is very quickly orders a retreat. Now, this was not, in hindsight, a great decision, but I do want to note from his perspective, you keep in mind, they run into the city, and all of the leaders are killed or wounded and taken from the field within minutes. So it certainly might appear to Donald Campbell that things were not going smoothly. And Campbell, as I said, orders a retreat. Now, he is later given a court-martial because of this. Many of the men on the scene who he took the lead of, they thought they could win the day. They just had to press on. Yes, they lost their highest-ranking leaders, but that's bound to happen sooner or later, especially when they're the ones literally leading the way into the line of fire. And these complaints made their way back to the Continental Army. Brigadier General John Sullivan is the one who presents the court-martial. The decision is that Campbell was wrong for his actions, and he is cashiered or kicked out of the army. Now, very interesting about this is still pretty early in the war. This is the summer of 1776, so it's still fairly early in the war, but it's a few months after the Battle of Quebec. Interestingly enough, Horatio Gates writes a letter to George Washington saying, is this good? Do you approve of this court-martial and its findings? Now, Washington, obviously, the reason they had court-martials was so they were justifiable decisions. It wasn't just the commander-in-chief dictating what happened. And already getting a little bit of a distaste for General Horatio Gates, George Washington actually writes his response to John Hancock, who at the time was president of the Continental Congress. And I have a quote here from him. It's a quote, "I am much at a loss to know why the proceedings were referred to me to approve or disapprove." End quote. Just classic Washington, especially early in the war, writing to Congress looking for their approval, but he's questioning why he's being asked for his approval, and he questions it by asking for Congress's approval for him to not know why. It's just a very George Washington way to go about things. Now, as for Campbell, like I said, he was cashiered from the army. Interestingly, the following February of 1777, Campbell is reinstated by Congress to his position, though he seems to have had enough, and he never actually rejoins the army again. He spends the rest of his life trying to reclaim some of the money he was owed as quartermaster, as well as try and reclaim the property that his father had originally been given or promised when all of these families were moved to New York decades before. I will note, Campbell in the 1760s, before the Revolutionary War breaks out, was able to get about 10,000 acres for himself and some of these other families, but he was never able to succeed and claim the entirety of the estate that these Scottish relocated families were expecting upon arrival. So that's a brief overview of Donald Campbell, a guy who finds himself in a really fascinating situation, much overlooked. It's pretty famous what happens to Montgomery and Benedict Arnold in the invasion of Quebec City. But we don't often hear the name Donald Campbell, who's the guy who got cast into the lead upon their injuries. And that's his story. Doesn't go so well, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit like. If you're new here, subscribe for a different founder, 7 days a week with lots of extra content all week long, including Thursday nights, where I do a weekly live wrap-up about these founders and the discussions I have. So if you have any questions about any of the videos this week or anything American Revolution at all, tune in 8:15 Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays, and I'd be happy to hear from you and answer some questions. Thank you, and I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.